So if you've ever used Photoshop, you will know how layers work, and this modifier stack here works in a similar way. You can stack modifiers on top and then you can turn them on and off later on. You can reorder them, and it's just a nice non-destructive way of working. You can also copy and paste modifiers from one object to another in this stack. So the full list of modifiers are here, and I'd encourage you to spend some time just seeing what each of these do. It's great to know what tools are available to you, and this is going to influence how you approach your projects. So I'm just going to go over into the front view, and I'm going to change our left-hand base to X-ray, and we want to create this edge here that are quite smooth. So to do that, we can add a chamfer modifier, and uniform seems to be the go-to for this, and the amount I'm going to bring down, and you can see what that's doing. So we can kind of eyeball this. I think 0.5 will be a nice round number, and I think one segment will work fine for the moment. Just going to change our color to grey, just find it easier to look at, and that's how our base is looking. So another thing I want to do is now add a subdivide modifier, and you can see that that's just going to add a lot of geometry, and I'm going to pull that down quite far, maybe like 2 centimeters. So we've added quite a lot of geometry here, and what I want to do with that is add a noise modifier on top. So you may have noticed when I click this modifier list, I can actually type in what I want. I find that's the quickest way to grab the modifiers. So I'm going to add a noise modifier, and in here I'm just going to change the strength to 2 centimeters for each of them. I'm pressing the up and down keys to just jump between these dialog boxes. And if I press F4 now and turn off wireframe, I can turn on and off the noise, and you'll see that that's kind of adding some irregularity to our box. And I think the scale is actually too big, so I'm going to bring that down to 10, and you can see now that's really affecting our box, not exactly what we want. So I'm going to bring this down to 0.2, 0.2 and 0.2. Now you can see that that is just quite minimally adding some noise to that. That could have possibly be too much, but let's just see how we get on with that. And because these are modifiers, we can always come back down and change this. So an example would be if I jump back down to this chamfer modifier and say I wanted to make it bigger, I can actually do that in the stack and maybe add another segment. And you can see that our modifiers on top are actually updating in relation to that. So let's just change that back to 0.5, and I'm actually going to leave that on 2 segments. I think it was nicer, smoother. The subdivide is on, and then the noise is quite a lot, but let's just leave it on that if we can change it later. And if I press F4, you'll see that we've now got a lot of triangles on here, and it's not that nice to look at. So we can turn display subdivision off, so we can just see the bare bones. So again, something that's great about these being layered is I can hold shift and select all 3 of these modifiers, copy them, and then I can just paste them onto our next object, and you'll see that they have now applied to this middle base. So I'm going to change that to grey again. I think changing the colors for me kind of signifies a little bit of a more finished product on that piece. So I know I can move on. But yeah, I mean, if I go to subdivide and we can see that that has all been subdivided up, and we've got the noise modifier on there as well. And you'll notice that in real life there are never any straight edges or surfaces. There's always going to be a real small irregularity. It's really hard to create a really straight edge, and that's something that gives CG away. So now we can actually use more polygons. It's worth adding the subdivide and the noise to a lot of your objects if you can afford it in render time. So I'm just going to paste that on our right hand base and change that to grey. We can actually do the same to all of our armrests as well. So I'm going to paste that on. And I do think that is possibly too much on there. So I'm going to bring the scale up for just our armrest to 20. And then I can just copy these over. So these are the armrest version. Just change all them to grey. And there's our base objects. So next we're going to look at some pillows. First I am just going to have a little shuffle, bring these in a bit tighter, because in our reference they are quite close together. So it's quite easy. In the top view we can go back down to edit poly, and you'll notice that our show end results is on. So if I just turn that on and off, what that does is turn off all of these. They're still on, but you just can't see them. So on this edit poly, let's turn off show end result. And I'm just going to select these two and bring them closer. Here, turn that off. Now there was never an edit poly between this chamfer, so you can actually add one between, which is really useful. And let's bring them in tighter. All right, and that's looking pretty good. I think that this has more chamfer on it. And in fact, I actually think all of our edges have more chamfer. So I'm just going to jump back down to the chamfer and put 1 into each of these. Now, perhaps a better idea would be if we instanced these. So if I copy these three again from our base. I'm just going to go through and delete these and delete this one, and then I can paste these on as an instance and over here, and we'll see that they're in italics. And what that means is if I change the chamfer on one of them, it's actually going to change on all of them, which is going to be useful for what we just did. So let's do the same, but I remember we changed the scale of the noise on the arms, so these are going to be different. So again, copy those, and we can use the delete button here as well and just paste them as an instance. And now we can change this chamfer to 1, and you'll see that that changed all of our armrests. Yeah, that's looking much better. Alright, now we can take a look at modeling some pillows.